I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 308. And we're here today with another Rut Fresh Radio episode in which we are getting the most recent intel from deer hunters all across the country about what's happening now, how are conditions impacting deer, and how can you get one killed right now.
Welcome to Wired to Hunt's Rut Fresh Radio. I'm your host, Spencer Newhart, and our flying solo this week is Mark Kenyon heads for the Boundary Waters in Minnesota, and I head to South Dakota on a muzzleloader hunt. If you're not familiar with this show, each week I talk to different hunters from across the nation to get the latest intel on buck movement in their area. The idea is then for hunters to then take that info and apply it to their strategies, to their setups, to their properties to help them get a buck on the ground. Now, ordinarily, Mark and I would open up the show with a bit of banter and talk about some big picture themes for this time of year and sort of preview what you're going to hear from our guests. If Mark were here, I think we would touch on the October lull because it's October 15th. And if you think of like the October lull date, that's what you would have in your mind. And I'm not going to break down the entire October lull for you, but Mark Kenyon just wrote an article for the MeatEater.com titled Why the October Lull is Real. As a defender of science, it bothers me to kind of say that yes, the October lull is real, but you need to go and read Mark's work like I did, and you'll see what point he's making about how what hunters are seeing and what the science is reporting are different things. So I think there's a lot to be learned from that article, and that's kind of a good precursor for hunting this time of year. We have 4 guests for this week's show, and we start off with Josh Smith from Wild Carrot Scents in Tennessee. Then we talk to Kevin Vistisen from the Deer Hunter podcast in Michigan. And then we talk to Beau Martonik in Pennsylvania from East Meets West Hunt podcast. And then we go to Kansas and talk to Nate Krick from Identical Draw. For this week's show, we've got a mix of public land hunters and private land hunters and southern hunters and northern hunters and aggressive hunters and passive hunters. So I think there will be something for everybody on this episode of Rut Fresh Radio. Now, we're going to kick it to the interviews. All right, and joining us on the line first is Josh Smith in Tennessee from Wild Carrot Scents. Now, Josh, in Tennessee, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'd say lately we've probably been at a 3. I would go even lower than that if it weren't for the little bit of cold front we had pushed through this past weekend. Got deer up on their feet a little better, so that was nice to see. Other than that, we just had some really hot temperatures, and it suppressed deer movement overall. I've been seeing does out and about a little more than the bucks, obviously. So, but overall, it's been pretty slow just with the heat, with the exception of this past weekend where we had about a 24-degree drop Saturday night. So it made for a little better hunting Saturday and Sunday morning, but still pretty low as far as buck movement.
What do your strategies look like this time of year? Kind of an awkward time of year when you don't want to be too aggressive, but you should still be in the woods because bucks can still be caught moving.
Yeah, for sure. Mostly right now, keeping tabs on acorns. That's a big thing for me. Just singling out any white oaks that I can find and hunt those as hard as possible. We don't have a lot of agriculture, so that's the best bet for right now. There's not really any sort of rut activity taking place yet, obviously, so just figuring out where the best food sources are and sticking tight to them.
As somebody who owns a deer urine company, what is your strategy with scents this time of year, and how does that evolve as we get into the rut?
Sure. Well, right now I'm using basic buck and doe urines as a cover. With the heat that we've got, it's pretty hard not to be stinking up the area, so I like to use those as a cover. Just kind of cover my tracks, basically. I'm sweating and stinking, so that's very helpful. And as we start to close in on pre-rut a little more, I'll get a little more aggressive with doe estrus and some of our rutting buck lures. And I do use those right now while I'm making mock scrapes. We do have quite a few cameras out sitting over mock scrapes, just kind of keeping inventory. So I'll use our scents that way right now. But I'm not really doing much as far as a drag or anything like that yet. I save that for a little bit later, probably a week or 10 days from now. Maybe I'll start to utilize those a little more.
You probably run more trail cameras than most hunters. Where are those trail cameras at this time of year, and how does that change over these next few weeks? Do you have any specific mock scrape sites that you find are superior to others right now?
Any mock scrapes that I've set up are generally going to be on any corridor going from bed to food. Anywhere that I can find a high traffic area where deer are coming out of the thick bedding area and moving toward those oak ridges like I talked about. Those are primarily where cameras are set up, and I'll have some randoms thrown out there just to maybe catch something I'm unaware of. But as far as targets, those are my hot spots. Trying to catch a good high traffic area, maybe a bottleneck of some sort in between a bedding area and food, which is primarily the acorns.
Are you concerned with moon phases at all this time of year?
Yeah, I am. We just kind of approached a full moon. I think deer tend to move quite a lot more in the evening hours, at night. They're not up on their feet as much in the daytime because they don't have to be. They feel a little more security cruising around at night. So yeah, I think it does have an effect. I'm excited to see as we taper off into a little cooler weather here in the next week. I'm excited to see what takes place as far as, having a new moon, and hopefully they'll be up on their feet a little more in the daylight.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Tennessee?
Oh, I think we'd get up to probably a 6, a little higher after that as pre-rut picks up a little more. But we're Wednesday night, for instance, we're going to drop down to lows in the upper 30s. Thursday is going to be high in the low 60s as opposed to like the upper 70s we're averaging right now. So I think that's going to help a little bit. So I'm optimistic. I think deer traffic is going to pick up a little bit, and hopefully bucks get to moving a little bit more.
All right, Josh. Well, good luck to you and everyone else from Wild Carrot Scents. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Spencer.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Beau Martonik from East Meets West Hunt Podcast in Pennsylvania. Now, Beau, in Pennsylvania, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would say that the buck activity is somewhere around a 5 currently. And the reason why I say that is we've had some cold mornings, some things, the acorn crops have been good and a little bit of movement, but still, I think here in the coming weeks, it's going to get better as scrapes and rubs are starting to pop up, as well as my trail cameras are starting to light up a little bit more in the last few days.
You just briefly touched on food sources, but tell me about what kind of food you're focused on this time of year.
So right now, the hot ticket item is the acorns. The red oaks have done really well dropping in this part of the state. White oaks are a little bit, harder to come by, but acorns have been the ticket. Apple trees seem to have lost a lot of their apples early, but nonetheless, acorns have been the hot ticket item right now.
What are your strategies in mid-October as a public land bow hunter in Pennsylvania?
So honestly, I'm trying to, be close to the food source, in this case being acorns in the that I'm hunting. There's not a whole lot of food plots, other food sources besides in the timber. And to do that, I'm trying to set up as close as I can to the cover where they're potentially bedding, and start to utilize scrapes. And the scrapes right on the edge of the cover going into some of these sources will really start to light up in the next week. Will be my strategy going forward.
With sign making increasing and the abundance of acorns, what is your trail camera strategy like right now?
So I run probably 90% of my cameras on scrapes, and they'll use the licking branches year round, but really starting to paw the ground and start, working them scrapes like you typically see in October. So that's where I'm getting the best intel, is on those scrapes.
When you see an approaching cold front like we have coming in a few days here in that part of the country, well, how do your strategies change on public land?
So what that's really gonna change for me is I'm gonna try to get into some of with the cold fronts. I don't like to put any unnecessary pressure in spots that, with the warmer weather, when I have, a bunch of locations to go to, but really the cold fronts would make me go into, some of my better areas.
Going forward then this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Pennsylvania?
I think that the buck activity, if we get the cold front like we're supposed to, I think it's going to jump to around a 7, I would say. I still don't think it's going to be, anything great, but I think it's going to start to increase, and as we start getting towards the latter part of October.
All right, Beau, good luck in Pennsylvania. Congrats on your elk success in Idaho, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Spencer.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver, off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co, and make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Kevin Vistisen in Michigan from the Deer Hunter podcast. Now, Kevin, in Michigan, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
1 to 10, I'm gonna go 2 to 3. The only reason I'm not saying 1 or 0 is because it is deer season and anything can happen. The reason I'm going 2 and 3 and staying really low is because I think, in complete honesty, right now, potentially the past week and this coming week are probably as hard a time as possible as you're going to have getting on a buck here in Michigan, because they are now pretty much off their summer patterns. They're fully off their summer patterns. Everything's hard horned. and the small game hunters are out, waterfowl guys are out. The deer are very alert to that it is hunting season, and they're basically going to be in their beds before daybreak. And most of these deer, yes, they're going to stand up out of their beds during the course of the day and maybe shift their beds, but they are not going to move, likely more than 25 to 75 yards outside of their primary bed in daylight. So unless you're slipping in right into tight to their bedding area, it is deer season. Anything can happen. A coyote can bump above the bed, but they're not getting up in the middle of the days going on walkable. Now there's just no reason to be doing that. Buck movement is at, I would say, pretty low from what I've seen over the course of the past week, and I expect that to continue through the next week.
Do you think this is a tough time of year for all Michiganders, or do the guys with private land have it that much better?
To be honest with you, I don't know that too many private landowners have a big advantage over public land hunters here in Michigan. Sometimes the public land hunters actually are the guys that are switched on and understand potentially how to hunt these parcels a little bit better because they're used to dealing with the pressure. But here in Michigan, we have a lot of small parcels. You might be dealing with 5 to 40 acres. And as much as you like to think you can control what happens on that private property, there's elements that are outside of your control. For instance, last weekend, one of our neighbors, his young son shot a doe. They didn't think before they acted, and they just went and looked for it, and then notified us later that they'd probably be on our trail cameras. And so, these deer, there's people in the woods and they know it. And sometimes those big public parcels are much larger tracts with bigger bedding areas than what you could even have on a small private land parcel. So I think either one has their challenges this time of year here and in any other pressured state as well.
Knowing that these next few weeks are going to be really tough in a state like Michigan, say you did have the ideal conditions you were looking for, and whatever that might be for a cold front, barometric pressure, and moon phase, what would your strategy then be to get a buck on the ground?
So it's very similar to what it is the rest of the year. I'm getting in tight to cover, thick cover, bedding cover, thick, dense understudy. The deer are browsing on just natural browse. There's still a lot of green foliage in the understory, so the deer are very much just feeding where they are bedding. They're not really moving to destination food sources until under the cover of darkness. Also, we have a lot of acorns on the ground, so these deer, they'll bed in proximity to where they can visually see where they're going to, be feeding before they move out to destination feed. And it's pretty tough to get in and on them. I mean, they're very savvy when they bed. They put everything in their favor and against you. But being a mobile hunter, being adaptable, and then what I really love this time of year is just being able to get out there too and hike around and check out some new spots. And you're kind of doing some in-season scouting. I try to stay out of my historic places that I know are going to be red hot come the beginning of November. I don't want to put human intrusion in those spots right now, so I'll let those deer kind of have those spots. And by staying out of those spots, other people that are hunting and applying pressure to other areas are just going to force more deer into those spots so that when the time is right, come, the few days before leading up to Halloween, all the way to the opener of our gun season around November 15th, that'll be my highest opportunity spots that I'll save for now. So right now, just being open-minded, being flexible, looking at new stuff. Wind is your friend and rain is your friend this time of year because everything's getting crispy and crunchy and the deer, like I said, are on high alert. It's pretty hard to get within their safety zone without alerting them to your presence. So if you get a a good windy day or a good rain where you can slip in somewhere quiet, more, with less intrusion than what was normal, and those deer can't pick you up, I think that's a pretty major asset to be able to get right in and on top of them this time of year.
As someone who does a lot of mobile hunting, is there anything with your setup or your gear that changes from now until that November 15th gun season?
The only thing that'll change for me is that basically my layering. Right now it's been pretty warm. We've had temperatures all the way up, to 70. The lowest we've really seen when I've been out hunting is, upper 40s. So I'm pretty much wearing what I'm hunting in, but I'll be adding a lot of layering. I'll keep a pair of bibs in my bag, as well as a puffy jacket and a shell and some thicker gear, so that when I do get into my spot and I get my stand situated, I go in very light clothing, just some hiking pants typically, or a light pair of hunting pants and maybe a hooded sweatshirt or even just a base layer top. And then when I get to my stand and I get everything situated, I'll give myself 5 minutes to kind of cool off before I put my warm, thick layers on and climb up. And other than that, no, not really, not much changes for my gear setup for being a hunter, other than, stuff that I need to stay warm. And, we can be in the single digits come here in November. So you almost have to be dressed for two separate things, the hike in and out and then the set.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Michigan? I
think we're going to stay low. We do have a cold front moving in that I believe that will definitely help. So, coming by next weekend, we could be up, to a 5 or a 6, but I don't think it gets good till, October 25th-ish, when some of the foliage is down and those first does, and start coming into essence, and those more mature deer are aware of that and start to have reason to get up on their feet a little bit earlier and go against their better judgment on traveling through the woods that they know people are hunting in.
All right, Kevin, I'm looking forward to following your hunts this fall. Good luck this season. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Spencer.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Nate Krick in Kansas. Now, Nate, in Kansas, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would say the buck activity's been around a 6 or a 7. It has been higher, though. Kansas and our part has been getting pretty good cold fronts. We've had actually a few bouts of really cold weather. And so we had one during the beginning of October and then just this last weekend. And during those cold fronts, I've seen significant increase in deer movement. And I'd say during those cold fronts, it could be even up to an 8 or 9 out of 10.
Now, you guys just recently bought a new property there in Kansas. How is your strategy kind of hunting a property for the very first time in mid-October? Are you aggressive, or you sit back and waiting for the end of the month?
We've been sitting back pretty heavy. We have a soybean plot with some radishes mixed in there as well, and that's on just the west side of our ground. So we can access that pretty easily without worrying about bumping deer or getting their bedding. We also set up cameras in the summer months when we were doing some other work in there, and we've let a lot of cameras actually just keep going throughout the year that we haven't even touched in the middle of our ground where we know those deer are bedding. So we've been hanging out on the edges, really not pushing in deep. We got lucky just the beginning of October with my brother killing a nice Kansas buck, and we were just hunting that bean field. It was kind of interesting. Our beans were a lot more green than the properties around us, so I think that was a big help with killing that deer. He was still kind of focused on those beans, but we've been hanging out on the perimeters, and we're lucky we have some cell cameras that are kind of doing the work in the middle of our property. But yeah, we're really hanging out until we really see that buck activity increase.
Are you seeing a lot of sign making right now? And what do you do with that info when you find an area on that property that has a lot of rubs and scrapes?
Yeah, so we actually didn't have any sign until this last weekend when we hunted that cold front. And when I was walking through stands a few times, I was seeing a lot more rubs, a ton more, basically just flipped on in the last week. So with that info, I've been moving some cameras around from food sources to like more of the timber on our property. Just this last weekend, I moved one of our cell cameras to Creek crossing with a lot of rubs around it. And since I've put that camera out, it has just been getting lit up all the time by a lot of does and bucks using it. So I've really been moving the cameras around. I haven't been seeing a bunch of scrapes on our ground, more of the rubs, and that's been really good info. Again, right now, we haven't really been hunting those areas. We've really been letting the cameras do the work, like I said, but we know that eventually once it really starts to amp up and the rut's going to be here before we know it, then we'll be hanging new stands and hunting those rubs and scrape lines.
Hunting an area that's so heavily dominated by big agriculture, how do you say the food sources change from now until the rut?
Yeah, so we've got corn and beans around us, a lot of it. We have a small like clover and turnip little food plot, and then we have a bean and radish plot, and we're going to leave our beans and radishes, go let them stay all the way through the winter, but the corn and beans will get harvested, and there's always a little shift in the deer movement when that happens, but really majority of the property that we hunt in Kansas is timbered besides our couple acre bean plots. So we're really going to be hunting the thick timber. We have a stream that works through our property as well, and we know that mature deer bucks will want to use that as well as a travel route. So we're really going to move off of the food sources and into that thicker, bigger timber where the does will be, the bedding will be, and those bucks will be in there trying to find some does. We also do have a few stands in the timber just off of that bean field a little bit, because I know big bucks won't necessarily want to be open in that bean field. They want to be in the timber a little deeper, but they want to get a nose on that bean field for the does that are out there feeding and things like that. So yeah, definitely going to be moving more into the timber in the next few weeks.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Kansas?
The next week, looking at the weather, it's not going to be anything crazy for this time of the year. So I'm going to keep it at probably about a 6 or a 7. But again, if that weather does change, if we see some colder weather come in, they'll be moving. That like I said, that first cold front that came through early October in our area, my brother killed a nice buck, and then just this last weekend there were a lot of big bucks on the move, and I saw a really nice buck in our neighbor's field on a tree edge, just out in the daylight. So I don't see it being crazy this week. I know a lot of guys can't get out and hunt during the week, but if it was up to me, I'd say, hey, this might be a good week to kind of stay off the ground if you're not seeing crazy buck movement, because I don't see any super cold temps, and it might be a good week to leave that pressure off there for later October and into the rut.
All right, Nate, well, congrats to you guys for that awesome Kansas buck you already got down. Good luck with the rest of the season and filling another tag.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. Appreciate it.
And that concludes this week's episode of Wired to Hunt's Rut Fresh Radio. Thanks to Josh, Beau, Kevin, and Nate for joining me. And thank you guys for listening. Good luck to everyone out there trying to kill one during this quote-unquote October lull. I'll be in the woods, and I'm really excited for some of my first whitetail hunts of the season. We'll talk to you guys next week, but until then, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some MeatEater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.